Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. In today's video I'm going to be talking to you about how you are very likely to get a new graphics card, or at least a used graphics card, from the newer AMD and Nvidia series very soon. Now, the reason why I say this is kind of twofold. For one, the Nvidia announcement recently that they are going to finally start making some crypto-specific cards, in addition to nerfing the newer inventory for having basically new firmware that will essentially limit their ability to crypto mine effectively. And in addition to that, the actual community has stated recently that they're going to be moving from a proof of work kind of environment within the ecosystem to proof of stake, which essentially is meaning that they are going to rely more on the network speed side of things than they are on the actual GPU speeds. And all this means for the rest of us essentially is that, for one, the market is going to have now a new source of GPUs that will be going to the miners, essentially kind of making the older GPUs at this point a little bit pointless because they'd be drawing a lot more power. So especially if you live in an area where electricity costs are more than, say, the median in the country, for example here in the United States, then continuing to use those cards, especially now after a couple of months of their release where they've most likely already paid themselves back, doesn't really make a whole lot of sense when the newer cards are going to be that much more efficient, allowing you to make that return a lot quicker and also to be able to rake in a lot more profits because they are effectively just a better card for this kind of stuff. Now, this does not mean they're going to be good at mining ETH. It'll probably be a different coin, but with that said, you have to remember that a number of these people bought huge farms full of these cards that are now essentially becoming obsolete, which means that they'll be put back on the market, sold, so that additional costs could be recouped and put towards either a very specific ASIC that's designed to mine the new coin, or it'll be going towards faster networking equipment and networking setups, again allowing the market to become essentially flooded with these now older GPUs, which means anything from the 3070 to the 3090 is most likely going to be going up on sale on eBay, Craigslist, whatever, and probably in pretty big quantities, which means that the prices on these cards are very likely going to drop well below MSRP. So while currently you're going to only be able to buy a 3090 for something like $3 grand, and that's if you're lucky, and somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 grand to $2.5 for the 3080, and respectively around $1,500 or so for the 3070, you're going to see all these cards dip well below their original MSRP and whatever other market value that we've currently had during this kind of scalping season. And I suspect that this is going to happen sometime around the summer as the kind of ETH security stuff gets changed to allow for this new method, in addition to them essentially reworking it into this new environment. But at the same time, you have to remember with these new mining specific cards coming out too, again, there's less incentive for the existing mining farms to keep that old hardware and basically continue mining with it. Now, no doubt some of them will continue using those same GPUs, but again, it just does not make a whole lot of sense. And given that both Nvidia and AMD are starting to move in a direction where they don't want gamers' GPUs actually being used for mining because it restricts a lot of the kind of purchasing that can happen on the gamer side, leading to potentially just a lot of really bad rep for the companies from the side of the gamers. Now, you could always argue the point that gamers aren't really the biggest market for neither AMD nor Nvidia, as the sort of server space gets them a lot more financial kind of bottom lines at the end of the year. But with that said, you have to also remember that these cards that are going to be coming out are probably still going to be at least relatively efficient using certain algorithms. But with that said, now that we've had so many months of basically no GPU stock, no ability to really purchase anything, outside of just older cards or getting scalped when trying to buy something new, now we are finally reaching a kind of inflection point where this is going to be a big deal. Now, there is also a possibility that when this happens, when ETH actually moves over to this new kind of method that they're going for, it could cause a bit of a crash too, and we could see a potential dip, at which point no doubt some players will pull out of the market. Potentially can have reverberations across the entire crypto community, causing additional other coins to dip as well. And no doubt this announcement that gaming cards will no longer be the sort of de facto go-to for these sorts of mining operations, it could have a ripple current throughout the entire, basically, crypto mining field, in the sense that now a lot more people are going to be cautious about going in and buying GPUs, which should help lower the demand for these cards moving forward. And considering that most of these people tend to already be savvy investors, it would be a bad move on their part to try and put their money into something that down the road is potentially going to not make them any money or not as much of a return as it used to before. That's just really poor financial planning. And so with that said, you have to take a look at this as a pretty glorious day for everyone in the gaming community, anybody who does 3D design, etc., as now you will finally be able to get your cards at a much more reasonable price point, and especially for those of us like me who are in VR, you know, getting the latest GPU, and specifically a single GPU that can really pull some good frames, that makes a huge difference. And this will be a boon for pretty much everyone across the industry as players ramp up on the latest versions of the hardware that's been released by AMD and Nvidia. Now, it's hard to say if we're necessarily going to get any new stock back, as right now the foundries are still pretty much tied up. We're still not seeing PlayStations or Xbox Series X's getting put on the market, or Series S for that matter, or at least the stock is very limited. And you're also seeing that a lot of the phones right now are taking up the manufacturing plants in terms of the silicon that's going to them. So most likely we're still going to be quite a ways off before we start saturating the market with sort of newer either refreshes of those same existing cards, or basically getting the same stock of those cards back in. But I have a feeling that most likely by the time that we see this dip where these cards do start flooding the market, there's a good chance we're going to have stock of new cards coming in as well, again, which will mean that there's going to be quite a plentiful supply. And even though we're still going to have a relatively high demand from all of the gamers, it's not going to be nearly as crazy, because there's not going to be that whole miner contingent in there trying to buy up those cards as quickly as possible, given all of this stuff that's come to light recently in the past couple of weeks or so, with these announcements being made by both AMD, Nvidia, as well as the people who are in charge of basically the F network. So this is all really awesome news for everyone, and hopefully, again, we'll all be able to game on some new shiny hardware, or at the very least much faster hardware going into this summer. And ideally, I'll see you guys all in VR, and in my next video where I'll be discussing some cool news coming up that'll be affecting the gaming and VR community. So stick around until the next video.